If you're waiting for the San Antonio housing market to suddenly become a seller's market again, or if you're just waiting for prices to take off again, then July 2026's numbers are going to tell a more interesting story. So we now have more than 17,500 active listings in our residential market in San Antonio, and they're taking 81 days to sell on average. So we're sitting at just over 6 months of inventory. But here's what's interesting. San Antonio's home prices have not collapsed necessarily. In fact, the median sales price was up 2%, and the average sales price year over year was up 3%. And that begs the question, what's actually happening? Well, I want to break that down here today because this is one of those markets where simply hearing that prices are going up or down doesn't nearly tell enough of the story. I'm Realtor Bert Taddei. I'm also broker owner of Santino Properties Realty right here in San Antonio. And I've been in this market for over 12 years now, since 2014. So let's take a look at what happened in July 2026. Let's begin with the sales. During July, 3,328 homes actually sold in San Antonio. And that's an increase of about 5% from July of last year. That's a good thing, right? I think that's an important number because despite everything that we've heard about interest rates, affordability, buyers sitting on the sidelines, homes are still selling. There are buyers in this market, but a very important but is that they have choices, the buyer. A lot of choices, as I'm illustrating here. And that brings us to what one of the most important numbers is in this entire report. And that is that it's inventory, right? The buyers have options. At the end of July, there were 17,567 active listings in San Antonio. And we also had 4,757 new listings come to the market in July during the month. And overall, San Antonio is sitting on an inventory of approximately 6.11 months. That is to say that if not another home gets listed for sale in San Antonio, it would take theoretically 6 months in order for that home to sell. So it's a very different environment than what we experienced several years ago with sellers. So when the inventory was tight, buyers sometimes had to make decisions very quickly. Then people might have overpaid for some of those listings, and there's very little room for negotiation for repairs, seller concessions for closing costs, of things of that nature. And buyers sometimes actually felt satisfied or fortunate that they were even able to get the house, stuff like that. But that is not the market that we're in today. Today's buyer can and then look at another house and another one, and if yours doesn't represent good value that they're looking for compared to the competition, well, the buyer has the ability to move on. And for buyers, that's great news. For sellers, it means that the strategy has to change tremendously. So homes are taking longer to sell. This is what I'm saying. And here's another number that really caught my attention. The average home that sold in July 2026 spent 81 days on market. That's among the highest that I've ever seen in my career so far. And that's up approximately 11% from a year ago. Now, what does that mean? Well, it means that we're talking about 3 months on average, just about, from the time that a property gets listed for sale for that when it hits the market for it to actually sell. So that doesn't mean that every single home takes 81 days. It's just an average. Some well-positioned homes can actually still sell considerably faster. But the days of putting almost anything on the market, throwing it out there and expecting immediate action from the buyers are behind us. Those are the 3 P's of real estate that I talk about in my videos, where you put a sign in the front yard, you place it in multiple listings, that you pray that another agent with their buyer comes along and sells that listing for you. Those days are over, right? It's not 2021 anymore. So today, price, condition, presentation, marketing, all those things actually matter. And they matter to a very good extent. And sellers need to understand something else. The first couple weeks that your home is on the market are the most important, incredibly important. So that's when you get the fresh inventory, right? And how the market reacts to that home, that listing is very important during the first 2 weeks. It's critical. That's when the buyers and their agents are paying the most attention. And if you come onto the market significantly overpriced, well, you can burn through that initial exposure and eventually find yourself chasing the market, but chasing it downward. You don't want that. That's a recipe for disaster. So what happened to home prices? Let's talk about that. Everybody wants to know what's with the home prices in San Antonio. Well, the median sales price in July was approximately $315,000. And here's where the story gets interesting, because that's about 2% higher than it was July 2025. The average sales price, $388,070. And that's about 3% higher than July 2025. And then the average price per square foot, if you want to look at that, came in at approximately $176 a foot. And that's about flat, right? It's about the same as last year. So despite the higher inventory and longer marketing times, prices really haven't fallen off a cliff, so to speak. That's interesting. And that's why I don't think describing this market as good or bad really helps anybody. Why interject that very bottom line type of an assessment? And so buyers have substantially more negotiating leverage and more inventory to choose from, which is what we're illustrating here. While property values, at least the market-wide level, have remain relatively resilient. So the number that really you need to hear about this market is that another statistics that we need to pay attention to, which is that homes sold in July at approximately 93% of the original asking price. About 7% discount was taken on average across the board. The market is essentially telling us that sellers who start too aggressively with their prices may have to eventually give some of that price back. So that's why I talk about in my videos, it's critical to price it right at a price that will cause it to sell from the very beginning. There's an important listing price, important lesson here, I should say. Your original asking price doesn't determine your home's worth. The market does, and it always has. It's always been the case. So let's face it, you can list your house for any number you want. You can ask for $5 million for the house, right? But buyers are comparing your house against everything else that's available to them. And as I mentioned, there's 17,500 other active listings. So they have plenty of comparisons, plenty of homes to choose from. And that's why I'd rather position a seller correctly from the beginning than spend weeks or months with making price reductions, trying to catch up with the market. And I tell in my listing appointments, I always tell the sellers the same thing, right? Hey, I'm paid on a percentage of the gross sales price. I want to sell this home for $5 million, as I mentioned, right? You're going to have to talk me down. But I tell them that in all seriousness, the appraiser has to be a part of the transaction. There will always be a factor in the market, at least the appraiser, with a cash deal. And even in this market, sellers, it's going to be buyers that are buying for cash. We're finding in this market are also retaining the services of an appraiser because it's so topsy-turvy right now. Last thing they want to do is overpay for a home when they don't have to, right? So we're finding that even cash buyers in this market are getting appraisers. So rich people are smart with their money, right? They have the money to spend and pay for cash for a reason, right? Because they're smart with their money. And appraiser comes along and look at the last 3 to 6 months of comparable sales in that same neighborhood, and it has to tell the story to substantiate that contracted sales price. Okay, so what July means for buyers? Well, if you're a buyer, July numbers should actually be encouraging because you've got 6.11 months of inventory. Homes are on average taking 81 days to sell, and sellers are not getting their original list prices on, by and large, that's the case, especially the properties available beyond those first critical 2 weeks that I'm talking about. So it creates opportunities for negotiation, and depending upon the property and the seller's circumstances, well, we may be able to negotiate things like price, closing cost assistance, repairs, interest rate buy downs with some of those seller concessions, and other things that you may find important. And that's especially interesting because affordability is still a challenge for a lot of buyers. So right now is an excellent time to buy. If you can get qualified, excellent time to buy, right? The purchase price is only part of the transaction, remember, because sometimes structuring the right offer can be every bit as important as negotiating the price itself. Buyers shouldn't assume that every seller has the same motivation. A home that's listed for 5 days is one conversation, and a home that's sitting on the market for 80, 120 days can be a completely different conversation, of course. Opens up the field for a lot of opportunity for negotiating a pretty good deal. And that's where having someone to actually study the inventory for you. So be sure to hire a professional wherever you are, whatever you're doing, wherever you're shopping. Because what July means for sellers, at least in San Antonio, is that numbers, I wouldn't interpret them as bad news because 3,328 homes actually sold in July. That's up 5% over last year. That's very encouraging. So there absolutely are buyers that are purchasing homes. However, today's buyer is a lot more selective, a lot more discerning than they can be. Sellers have to compete. It's always a competition, whether you're buying a home, selling a home, or investing in real estate. So you have to ask yourself, how am I going to win this competition? And that matters enormously. The things that matter are going to be price, presentation, but more importantly, the marketing. I'll talk to you in other videos about my target marketing to find opportune buyers and certainly the most credible and qualified buyers. But if another home in your neighborhood offers the same money, then you've got an issue, especially if you're not using target marketing. If another seller is offering concessions and you're not, well, we need to understand how that's affecting your position. And if buyers are repeatedly looking at that house, but nobody's writing an offer, well, that's information for you to take into consideration. The market communicates with us. The market speaks to us. Always. It's telling us something. Our job is to listen instead of fighting. One number that I'm watching next, and this is the one statistic that I think I'm keeping my eye on and think it's important, is that San Antonio had approximately 2,554 pending sales in July. That's down about 13% compared to July of 2025. Now, 1 month doesn't establish a trend by itself. However, pending sales give us a glimpse into future closings. So it's a very important stat. So this is one of the numbers that I'll be watching very closely when August stats are released. Are buyers becoming more active? Does inventory continue to climb? Do marketing times continue to get longer? And most importantly, what happens to prices? Think about that. Those numbers will help tell us where the market is going to be heading into fall. So the rental market, as for homeowners or investors, here's one quick data point, because I think this is important if you've considered perhaps, well, just rent the house. I've talked about this in other videos. The average rental was approximately $1,877 per month, with about 4,963 active rentals, however, readily available. They're on the market right now. That's almost 5,000 homes. That's worth watching as well, particularly for homeowners that are debating whether to sell the property or potentially retain it as a rental, because now I wouldn't make that decision just based on the market-wide average alone. We'd want to run the numbers on an individual property, but think about that. A specific neighborhood might have stronger numbers, however, 5,000 to choose from, that becomes a broader discussion and an important piece of the housing picture here in San Antonio. So if I had to summarize the July 2026 San Antonio housing market in one sentence, it would be this. Buyers have regained leverage, but that doesn't mean that homes have stopped appreciating or stopped selling. We had 3,328 sales once again, a median sales price of $315,000, still better than any of the four major Texas markets, the best of the four. More than 17,500 active listings, 81 days on market on average, and just over 6 months of inventory. That's a market where buyers can afford, where sellers need to be strategic, making decisions based on, that's a lot more important to make decisions based on fact rather than fear. Let me say it that way. Real estate, remember, is hyper local, and even within San Antonio, the market might have a $250,000 home that can be very different than a $700,000 home. Right? They're different neighborhoods, and your neighborhood is specific. The price ranges, condition, competition, those all matter to you specifically. So if you're thinking about buying or selling a home in the San Antonio market, don't base that decision solely upon a national housing headline. We like to click on stuff and just based on some of the negativity out there, or even the citywide numbers, don't even depend on those. It's, again, hyper local, because you've made it to the end of this video. And so here it is. Let's look at your specific situation. If you're selling, I can show you exactly what you're competing against and what the buyers are actually paying for in your area, which is critical. And hey, like I've talked about in other videos, and I've mentioned here in this video, target marketing. We have that in our back pocket to find the most opportune buyer for your individual property. It's not about how many homes that a neighborhood expert has sold or whatever. It has nothing to do with finding the most opportune specific buyer for your specific type of home. Someone that would have a feverish response to your home based on the characteristics. And hey, at the end of the day, I also have an easy exit listing guarantee. Who's offering guarantees anymore, especially in this marketplace? And if you're buying, hey, we can identify properties where the market data might give us negotiation leverage. And hey, that approach can save you thousands of dollars upfront and or over the life of the loan and the course of time. Now, for my buyer guarantee, I must tell you that I have my, also offer that as well. Reach out to me and I'm going to tell you all about the buyer guarantee. But we also offer that perfect home finder exclusive program, which is a proprietary method by which if you don't like the homes that are currently available on the market, the 17,500 of them, but don't float your boat. Let's go out and use my marketing dollars to find you that special home you want to move to. Homes that nobody else knows are available. We reach out to the sellers themselves, prospective sellers, see if they'd be willing to sell their home to you. As long as you're well qualified, they might want to do so. Reach out to me directly. I'll be happy to take a look at the numbers with you. I'm Bert Taddei. I'm broker owner of Santino Properties Realty. Reach me at 210-376-TALK. And let's see what next month has in store for us we break down the August 2026 numbers. Enjoy the rest of your summer, and thanks for watching.